All right, welcome to Dargon Gaming Squad. I'm back and with Chris, of course. And today we're going to be talking about like a little myriad of issues and see what you all think and some other things been going on. So, actually, at first, I want to start talking about something that I've been recently doing. So, when I've been having time, I've been gaming with my family, and I've actually just started using a game mat and miniatures. I didn't think I would actually like it, but I'm finding really quickly that it definitely helps with combat. And I don't know. I think this the moral of this really short story is going to be just try everything. 'Cause I really didn't think I like it, but over time, it actually ended up becoming really fun. And spells are a heck of a lot more fun to use now that I can actually map out and measure how far they go. Definitely been a lot more friendly fire with a fireball. We already lost two members. Well, they dropped them to zero, not lost completely, but two members from rogue fireballs. Flying into really bad or strategically placed locations, and also fire. I've noticed some of the big things. Fire spreading has become a whole new issue that it's really hard to explain with narrative, but it's a lot easier to explain when you can actually draw it out on the map and showing how fast the fire is spreading. So that's been really cool. So Chris, I don't know if you've ever played in a game, Matt, or I know you
I
kind of
have
do
not,
something similar.
I have not yet played on a game mat. I do have a mat that I've offered up to my home group DM, but we haven't ever broken it out and used it. What we do is we all throw down a die on the floor. We always play in my family room, for those who don't know, and we throw down a die for each of us to represent us. And so then when our DM asks us marching orders, we arrange our die so that we can visualize what we're doing and he can see it too. And then if we get into a big combat, he'll throw a bunch of extra dice down to show us where groupings of threat are, and thin them out as we go sometimes too, because we've had some battles that have had just crazy big numbers of enemies. So we've done that. Beyond that, we that's the closest I've gotten to doing any kind of mat or figures. So I'm curious, do you guys just I don't know how really I've never even seen a mini game played. So do you only use it for combat situations, or do you map out areas where there's potential? How does that work?
So what I do with the mat, I use it in two sections. So the square grid one, I use that only for combat. So I'll actually like kind of draw out little locations. I'll draw out hindrances to maybe running, like little paths of like rough terrain. But on the other end that has a hex, I actually draw out maps. So when they're traveling, right now they're doing a seafaring type game where they're kind of pirates, kind of adventurers. They're somewhere in between. I don't think they even know what they're doing. We only played 5 games so far, so I think they're still figuring each other out as a group. So I actually use that map to show like what's going on. So I'll draw like the little like zoomed in location. I'll show them where the hurricane's at and where they believe that this magic item is. I'll show them where a blockade is, so they can kind of strategically make it. And it's really funny you mentioned the dice because they do all the same thing. They put the dice on the board, and that's their tokens for the game.
Nice.
It's really
Nice.
silly.
Well, dice are so handy when we all have them, right?
Yeah, exactly. They are incredibly handy. So that's what we've been kind of using it for. But as far as like role play situations, no, that'd be ridiculous. I mean, I kind of do. I'll kind of like, there's been parts where they've been standing on the beach and I'll draw that a section out. Like, hey, where do you guys want to go? Do your role play, do whatever the hoopty you want, move as far as you want to. And, like we'll have our wizard set up her dancing lights and, little auditory, sensory bull crap. And we'll have one of the members move their character token to the water and start fishing. It's not that big of a deal, but I only use it really just so we can get a general idea what's going on in combat. Because, like, especially in my games, combat situations and some of the crazy thing characters want to do can just get so convoluted. You need to have the markers they're placing where they're at to kind of show what they're doing. Like we have this one monk, a shadow monk, and he's super speedy, super speedy. Like when he's really trying to go, he can move 180 feet in one turn. So
Wow.
he does this thing where he always goes around and flanks, which is great. But that'd be really hard to think of it narratively. I mean, I guess it could be possible. So I always, kind of draw out where he's going and showing. And he kind of shows where he's going to attack and who's going to come up behind. It just makes it so much easier and so much better to
Nice.
figure
So the visual. I would almost like to sometimes I wish we had a little more visual in our second edition home group, because sometimes I do have a hard time visualizing what's being described to me.
Man, I
And
wish we had a visualization for our group
yeah, right.
sometimes.
Well, we do. You know, I made a sheet. It took a sheet of graph paper, and I actually printed graph paper off the internet so that I could pick the size grid I wanted, as
Yeah.
opposed to the graph paper that I have at home that's got a really tight grid on it. And I did two different sizes, and I laminated them.
Oh,
And
cool.
so then you can use a like a whiteboard marker or a V-C-D. A V-C-D is a better
Yeah, I use the wet
option.
erase. Wet erase are amazing.
Yeah, the wet erase, because it doesn't smear as much until you want to get rid of it. And I do have that, and that's it seems like a tool that would be handy, but I've never. I made it, and then our group, you ended up taking over DMing, and I haven't ever actually tried it out. But I imagine it would work pretty well. You could, map stuff out. But my other GM is just not. He's not into doing anything.
Well,
Excuse
when
me.
I come up, we'll have to actually have to use it because I want to see how you guys like it because it helps. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff. Actually, I want to bring up another issue that Kenzie brought up. That's one of the people I play with in my other game, and her problem is with the turn taking system. And I want to see if any of you guys have a different idea. So we're playing with a lot of new players, so it's really hard. They're just now learning, just like our group just started learning how to be more strategic, I think, a little bit and more communicate more. Their group is even worse. Like they have no idea what they're doing. They're all just running around. And I think it's fitting though, as a group of new players and new ventures just meeting, they wouldn't know what to do. But she's saying that everyone should say what they want to do, and then I should enact it, and then they should be able to change it during the game. And like I'm trying to find like how a nice little balance where maybe they can communicate more and then do that. So I was thinking, well, first off, I already set them up in lines where they sit as in which turn people take. And I already figured out that I can't be at the end of the table. I have to be in the middle, which is annoying because I don't want everyone seeing my dice roll. But I guess sometimes it has to be that way. But yeah, so what do you think about that? Like just everybody first saying what they want to do and then me continuing the game. Do you think that's fair or not? And just so you know, too, we also have 2 players that can speak telepathically.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think that personally, I think that the initiative system, I've heard a lot of. I don't think there's anything wrong with the initiative system, but I have heard a lot of other people kind of say that they don't like having to stop and do it.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think there's a couple sides to it. There are systems that don't have a literal initiative system. And when I played Edge of the Empire the other night, it was very much like who feels like their character would act first.
Oh, I do that for you guys all the time too.
Yeah, and there was a initiative system, but you don't necessarily follow it because it is more narrative based. So I don't think there's anything wrong with adjusting for it. The thing that's nice about initiative, in my opinion, is I think it's a little, if you at least have it, if you at least, whether you pre-roll it at the beginning of the session and stick through it for the whole session, which is totally okay, or whether you go ahead and roll it or have some other system for it. The one thing is it is nice in making sure that you don't miss anybody. And I know that's a problem we've had is people getting skipped and or you forget about the NPCs. We have a lot of NPCs in our group, right? Yeah. So that can be kind of difficult.
It also gets more convoluted when sometimes the players are supposed to control the NPCs, but then they don't do anything with the NPCs. So I'm like,
yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity there for one of our players who's just needs to. I guess you guys need to work out between you whether that's going to continue or whether she's going to take the reins. But yeah, she needs to remember maybe to include it on her turn or roll initiative for that.
I think luckily we already dropped that idea, and then we just decided that NPC, which she was a Beastmaster, but then she switched over to Primeval Guardian. Is that it? I think she was a Primeval Guardian. I think so. The one where she turns into it's a ranger where she turns into a tree. That's pretty much it. But so that one already lost. But I mean, yeah, even then it's still like you still have some control. I mean, OG is your best friend, so you should be able to tell him what to do. So what
Right.
I think my solution I found for it was first that we just talk as a group who would basically be most effective going first. But
Right.
the only other issue is though is that, or not issue, the only other like side part is that if you want somebody else to go first, you can call out to them. So let's say if the mage wants to lay something first, you can say, hey, mage goes first, we'll switch to spots. And so
Right.
usually they sit in order. So usually it's a shadow monk that's going first, followed by the warlock because she wanted to go because she's all fireballs everywhere, and other basic spells everywhere. And then it kind of just goes around. Some of the last people last. So it
Well,
can
I
kind
think,
of work out that way as long as you're talking and communicating and be like, hey, let's let the tank go first so we can take up all the blunt. And then like,
yeah,
oh, yeah,
right. Well, and I think there's a couple. For one thing, like I think there's a couple things. Is that one is I don't think it's any less disruptive to
mhm,
have a whole conversation about, well, who's going to go first? Who's going to? I don't think that's necessarily great either. If it's happened narratively
yeah,
and you're approaching a situation and somebody who's maybe their character is assertive, or maybe there's somebody who's a leader character who says, hey, you should go do blah blah blah, and then
yeah.
we'll then that makes sense. But it can be just as disruptive to have a out of character conversation to decide all that too, right?
Oh, definitely.
So the other thing is I would remind them that they can pass. They don't have to go.
Yeah.
Just because they rolled initiative doesn't mean, and we forget this in my second edition group all the time. And I'm amazed that for all the times that between the druid and my mage that we've used area of effects spells so effectively, I'm amazed how often other characters in our group still rush forward in a situation where we could lay down a big AoE and really neutralize the situation or take out a bunch of enemies. So I think that the other thing would be that maybe the group, when it's not in a combat situation, role plays out that, hey, you guys, from now on, let's try to do this when we encounter a situation.
That's definitely what I'm trying to encourage. And also
Yeah.
another thing too that I kind of really figured out that really helps and also makes the game feel less like, oh, here comes this turn and here comes the enemy's turn. Here comes our turn and here comes the enemy's turn. Is what I'll have them do is I'll have them sit, in the order. So they'll decide and be like, oh, you the monk, you should go first because you're going to be not you should go first, but you should act first because you're the fastest of all of us. So everyone kind of gets in a position and they stay in that position for the game. I roll the initiative for the bad guys. So sometimes there's going to be points where the bad guys are one of the first guys to go, and sometimes they kind of stagger in between. Or sometimes I have really bad rolls, and usually they're bad because their dexterity is usually low. They're almost always at the end. But sometimes it still mix it up. So usually when it'd be like the monk and then the wizard goes, sometimes it's the monk and then the bad guy moves. And they're like, whoa, it's like actually kind of moved and changed differently. And I think that was kind of awesome and fun. And then I got to play with the beholder in a combat situation. And that was really cool having all the eyeball stocks being able to go either every turn or not every turn. It was awesome.
Ooh,
There's
that
so
sounds
much
like a
fun.
lot to track, though.
It it is, but then at the same time, I found a really nice little system for it. Because of the game mat, I can actually draw on it. So I have like a giant like little play field right in front of me. So I have like circles, and I basically mark off with each turn. I have a different color to show if the bad guy went or not.
Oh,
So I
wow.
roll for them all, and then basically I just mark, 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 mark.
So,
But usually it doesn't last longer than 2 turns anyways because they blow up everything. Fireballs everywhere.
I think Bill, my second edition dungeon master,
Mhm.
I think he rolls enemies as a group. So we don't usually have a lot of, oh, now this one goes, now that one goes.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of just like your guys' turn, and then the bad guys go.
yeah, usually, not always, but in a lot of cases, especially if it's a huge, I mean, again, we've had a couple just enormous battles,
Mhm.
and where it's just been huge numbers of enemies, and we haven't necessarily been the only ones combating them in those situations, but I think a lot of times he does do a group, and I think if there's less enemies, then sometimes he probably rolls them individually, but
I like that, and by the same time, I don't because it feels more dynamic when sometimes you're having like the random rogue kind of have his own turn in the middle of the game versus just having a huge group just
well, I think
kind of
it probably
clustering.
depends on how you do the hit points too, right? Because
Yeah.
I know I've seen a couple different or heard of people doing like a group hit point total too, as
Oh,
opposed
cool.
to every enemy has this, it's like there's this collective amount. And I don't know if they, I've heard people talk about it. I've heard it in podcasts. I'm pretty sure that I've seen it on a couple people's channels. And I'm not sure if they break those up into subgroups or if they just do like one big mass one, but that makes it easier too. And then you're not trying to track every single, I know for me, the couple times that I've run, that's been one of the hardest things for me. And I've kept all my battles, all my combats have been fairly simple. So I haven't needed to go to anything different, but just tracking like which enemy are they targeting and keeping track of their hit points is hard. So I can't imagine doing that in a massive battle.
Sometimes I do hit marks too.
Huh?
Sometimes I do hit marks. So basically, if there's an enemy that I feel is weak enough, as long as they get hit twice, they're pretty much dead. And that's like when there's really big groups of small enemies, I will sometimes just do that and just throw it out to the wind. Like, you don't really have to keep track of all those hit points. Like, if you hit them once or twice, they're dead. It's not going to matter anyways. I mean, 20 points, and I'm having a monk who can hit 4 times in a row. I mean, 5 times a piece is key. Like, it's stupid.
Right. Yeah, that'd be so much easier. That does seem a lot easier. And there's nothing wrong with simplifying it for the party once in a while, especially I think in the early levels, right?
Oh, like, yeah.
Giving them that option of kind of feeling.
Well, I mean, in the early levels, it's actually easier because all the bad guys have like 9 hit points. I mean, math at that point is super easy. It's when you're starting to get into our levels, like 10th level, where the monsters are like 56, like 72, and it's like,
right.
And they have healing properties, and it's like, okay, and then I have to keep track of what turns they can go, and I have to keep track of rolling for their things. Like, you have to get really organized as a DM. So that's why each bad guy usually have like a little box for them, and I have like their own little character sheet.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But if you have a lot of enemies, wow, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's when I think the hit pull or just the hit marks works.
Right. Every now and then, and Bill will say too, he'll say something like, you guys just collectively did, X number of damage that you know of, right? He'll tell us like how much damage we did collectively, but he won't necessarily tell us how many hit points it was total, but he'll give us it's a clue, because they'll say, wow, you guys did 150, you've already done 150 hit points of damage, and this thing's still going strong, or something like that. But it's kind of fun.
That feels so meta, but it doesn't at the same time.
We are a little meta in some ways in our group, and it's a little, yeah. For the most part, it's not to the point of ruining the game for anybody, but there's a couple things, but he doesn't do that very often. He'll just like,
that is still pretty funny.
To, like, have us have a sense of the magnitude of what we're dealing with, without telling us too much. And then the funny thing about our group, speaking of meta, is that our group will literally say, I'm down to 2 hit points. I only have 10 hit points. Like, it's a normal conversation for us. And I always I found myself at one point, like, trying to pull away from that and more like describe my condition. And, we came right back to, well, how many hit points do you have left? And I'm like, okay, I give up. This is just the way this group dynamic is. And, so it's kind of fun.
I really enjoy Miriam for that reason, though, because, like, I don't know if you noticed, she does both and very well. She'll explain how her character's position is inside combat encounters, but then when it comes to it, she's like, oh, on a scale of 0 to 32, I'm at a 18.
Right.
Like,
it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But she's also good at describing, like, I think I am really bad at expressing and hanging on to those injuries, right? You have those injuries and they hurt, and we just all act like, whatever, we got hit, but Mary's really good at really saying, oh God, my arm.
You know what? I think Shay should lose a toe now that you made me think about that.
Huh?
I think you should lose a toe now that you made me think about that.
Really?
Remember that piercer fell through your foot?
What fell through my foot?
Remember the piercer, like the little stalactite, it fell from the
Oh,
ceiling and then hit your
yeah.
toe.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
can.
you should lose a toe.
Oh, come
Come
on, it
on
hit your foot.
now. Mean.
You have tiny feet.
So here's a question. If that were the case, when I change into my animal form, would I have all my toes?
No, I think you're. I don't know. That's a good question because your animal form is staying connected through spirit. So I guess I'll let you decide through that if she would regain her toe and then you go back to your knot, or
Like,
if she would keep it.
and when I switch back, would I be all healed?
No, absolutely not.
Scars, man.
Yeah,
I don't
they
know.
matter.
Maybe it wouldn't be my toe. Maybe it would be um, broken bone in my foot.
That'd be cool. Maybe we should give her like a little peg leg. It could be like the new Torvald.
No.
Anyway, so let's also talk about. Do you want to talk about the stream, or do you want to talk about our issues with some of the players right now? How
Um.
things aren't matching up.
Well, since we've been kind of talking about player dynamics a little, why don't we just
Carry on with it.
talk about that?
All right.
So I think this conversation, I want to preface this by saying we would love to hear your ideas about how, if you've dealt with situations like this, how did you resolve it as a group, or what's your best advice for how to move forward? And I feel like I want to say too that I feel like a lot of groups, I hear a lot of, hey, we play on this night, hey, we play on that night, we play every week or whatever. How did you guys arrive at that, and how do you deal? I don't know. I'm just curious. I guess I'm curious how many groups really have a regular schedule, or is that just a perception that many groups successfully have some regular schedule? I'm curious about that, and how do you manage it as a group? And if you play every week, how do you not burn out?
Yeah.
Especially for the GM or the storyteller or whoever.
So I'm gonna start off explaining the situations, at least from DM's perspective. So first off, two of the players, which one of them is my lady. We are just starting college students. She has a part-time job now. I have a full-time job. We're moving houses. So there's a lot of moving parts right now. And I know once everything kind of starts settling down, we have our firm schedule, it should be way easier for us. I'm also going to start by saying I'm definitely not burning out in my game. I find myself thinking about a lot, but at the same time, it's very difficult to get everything running, especially when everyone's like, no, we can't play this day, we can't play this day. And I'm also having some problems with my players. So my other two best compliments, I have two other players, Chris and Miriam. They're both older, they're both more established, and I think they're better at communicating because they've been around longer. Miriam's played a million bazillion games. Chris is she's just really good at everything. So they're both awesome. They're great, and they're also the only two that really play by post. And we've been trying to set up play by post, but I'm quickly figuring out that half the group does not like it. They just can't get into it, which I don't blame them. And it's not for lack that they don't enjoy the game, because two of our other players, I know they enjoy the game because I hang out with them all the time, and they're always talking about it. They're always talking about their characters, so I know they're interested. It's just maybe play by post isn't their thing, and that's totally okay. That means I can split up the group and do cool stuff. But on the other hand, we also have some other players in the group where it just seemed like they're honestly not interested, and I don't want to say they're not without actually asking them. And when I do ask them, they say they're interested, but they just don't seem to put any of the effort that really corresponds into it. And I know life gets in the way and stuff, and sometimes you just won't. And I think it just might be one of those things, like they might not just be interested in this particular game or in this format, which is okay. And I can move around that. I know how to get past that, but it's just kind of like that difficult time trying to see if they actually are interested or not. And I think it will really tell as soon as we get a permanent schedule to see who's going to start showing up on that permanent schedule. I think that'll say who is really interested and who is more or less, not a really big deal. And either way, it's not a huge deal. But we're just going to find out. So I don't know if you guys have any advice for this or about how to get people more interested in play-by-posts. I know when I'm doing play-by-post, I'm definitely interested. I'm trying to think about it, but at the same time, they're playing when I'm at work, so I can only sneak in a little bit here and there and trying to set up a schedule for everybody. So I thought the kind of cool part of play-by-post is I can kind of get in and get out when I need to. So I respond maybe within, what do you say, about every 2 hours, every once an hour?
Yeah, I think you've been pretty good with that. And that's, the same goes for me. I'm at work, and
Oh,
actually,
you're awesome on
yeah,
that.
I'm at work, and so, I'll if it's a slow day, it's been kind of slow at work for me lately, and so I've been, kind of hopping in and doing checking on that stuff. But there's times too where it's like I get busy and I can't. But I'm lucky to have that. I have a desk job, so it's, I'm lucky to have a situation where, if nothing else, I can use my break to hop in and see what's going on in the game and respond. So yeah, but I think you've been really good about checking in regularly. I think, for my part, I think that I would say to folks who are being confronted or being given the opportunity to play in different ways, if something doesn't suit you, don't be afraid to say so. So we did ask everybody what they thought about play by post. We have some people who don't check in on the message, our group as much, and maybe just never saw it, or maybe just weren't comfortable saying. But like, it's totally okay to say, that's not my thing. I'm not comfortable doing it. I do know one player has said that. Yeah. And so I'm not surprised that he hasn't jumped in, and right now his character's elsewhere anyway.
Emily's told me that too as well.
Yeah, and so it's totally okay to say that and say, you know what, the play-by-post just isn't going to work for me. And it kind of became obvious when we hit this point where, my character said, looking around, waiting for input from everybody else, and we never got it. And so that's okay. We'll reserve play-by-post for, Mary and I don't have any problem doing that. And we can reserve it for things where it'd be just the two of us.
Yeah, I think they're fun.
That's fine. I think they're fun. And I like that you can jump in and out and, and resolve things. My hope was that at least this one time we could push it through and get the things resolved that we needed to do so we could get back to the main story. But sadly, it just doesn't suit some people, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So
yeah, I think at this point, what I'm hoping to do when we get back in the game, I'm just going to have to, not hand wave, but I have to basically push through everything, whatever they wanted to do, and then basically say, okay, so winter is basically coming to an end, and we're going to continue on our adventure. And I think I'll hopefully kind of get everybody out of the hiatus and start pushing us along the way. And anybody who doesn't want to go can stay back in Barstown. That gives a really good time to be like, yeah, I'm going to go with this. Because I do have plans. I do have a lot of plans for the next adventure, and actually, might as well talk to you guys or bringing it up. I think we kind of came to end with the other thing we're saying. I'm definitely going to try doing a new spin on the story. So we basically went through from when they're just doing basic adventures, kind of building up to the adventures that they were helping move some stuff. Now they're going into an area where they're going to have no real friends. They're going to have no real help, and basically enemies are going to be all around them. And so I'm going to let them decide how they're going to tackle this situation, and if they're going to be political about it, if they want to start more of a political-based game, or if they're going to be more sabotage and espionage, or if they're just going to go straight out, I'm going to start rebellion and rioting and all that cool stuff. So I'm just really waiting for them to kind of decide how they're going to handle this whole entire situation. I'm really excited almost, and I think there should be enough combat to keep some of those people interested, and enough kind of like I can really mess stuff up for some other players. Because I know one of them is really huge on political stuff. He actually made his entire character around it. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
That should be interesting. There is a question I have for the folks watching. I think you guys we've talked a lot about doing like mini sessions and side quests and things. And I'm curious how other GMs handle those things, and like, where do you draw the line on what, or do you draw a line on things people are doing? Because I don't know exactly. We don't know what happened yet, but there's been some hints from HEMA that that something serious has happened to one of the players in one of their mini sessions. And so I'm curious what people think. My thought about the mini sessions, or at least what we've done so far, has either been the party's literally been split up and it's been a mini session because it's been less of the party, or it's been side quests like during our downtime. And so I'm curious about whether anybody sets boundaries as to, what those sessions can or should consist of. So I guess I've thought of them again as either, hey, we had to split the party, and so this is what's going on here, and this is what's going on over here, in which case that things can go seriously wrong.
Mm.
But for downtime things, hey, we're in town, what are you doing while you're in town? It seems like some people have done some pretty serious stuff that could end up with consequences that can screw up our timeline. And so I'm curious about that. Like, do people set boundaries? How far are you willing to go as a GM with something like that? Or do you restrict people? And even Nate, what are your thoughts on it? Because I feel like you're pretty open and very sandboxy about all of it. So, like, anything goes if we want to do a side quest, or
Pretty much anything goes if you want to do a side quest, unless it completely goes against the characters in the group's morals. Unless you already made it clear to me that your group has, or that your character itself has very ambiguous morality. So I have currently a player that is deciding to possibly do something that could really terrorize the group and screw up the group, but it could make for a very interesting storyline. And my idea of mini sessions are, it's a real active, breathing world. You're not going to do everything with the group. And also, when you introduce yourself to new characters and do these new cool quests, you are giving me more opportunity to bring more NPCs into the game, more story, and a deeper storyline. So I personally love it. So that means, yes, Hema is different than Shay. Hema has other friends, and she's made different enemies than Shay has.
yeah,
Shay has a love and a crush, and she has her own very particular, very unique enemies that hate her, but maybe not the rest of the group. And I think that's a really cool, and that can kind of bring a lot of very fun flavor into the game.
yeah.
And bring into that mini sesh, I'm thinking actually, I kind of thought of this, when we go to the east and when you guys are doing the kind of thing, I think it actually be a great idea to split up the group. That way we can have the players that want to play every week, that can set a more specific timeline, more set time to play, that they should be able to go off and do their own thing. And the players are going to be a little more sporadic, or maybe players that want to do more espionage and more political stuff, which I know not everyone would be interested in, can maybe do their own thing and still have it in a very local area where we can meet up and like maybe just have role play sessions where we just talk about what happened, or maybe even like group battles when they need to fight. So
right. So I'm
definitely
curious,
thinking about this.
how do you track that? So I know right now we're in an okay place with the timeline, but the last before Rose went off on his side quest,
Yeah.
prior to that, we had a couple situations where the side quests and things were getting a little bit mixed up. So
Hugely.
And I remember being concerned because it sounded like something like somebody. I mean, it's almost like dealing with time travel, where you talk about they always talk about the paradoxes, and if you screw this up, then this won't have been able to happen. And so we've had some situations where the players have we've gone backwards, and they've done something that was prior to a session that we've already played. So how do you ensure that player
doesn't screw everything up?
Yeah,
that's what I call bad organizing on a DM's part, and that's when you need to do something called meta magic, and start just hand waving some really important things. But luckily, I didn't have to. He gave me a great idea. He called out for OG to pick him up, and OG did pick him up. Luckily, he rolled a 27, which was incredibly high. So yeah, I'll give him that one. But yes, it's been pretty bad where things have almost gone completely awry. And I think at that point, either I just have to let it fall through and say, let the dice fall where they may, and basically your character is lost and dead, or making some really terrible decisions, because they make some stupid decisions. I mean, I love it, but incredibly dumb. And sometimes you gotta let your players just have it. And if that counts for Hema and the other character dying, then so be it. Luckily, they didn't, though.
Goodness.
But it definitely did.
I mean, and like right now, it wouldn't matter so much because we haven't hit a point in the timeline where we're ahead of what they've been doing, so we're okay. But we did have some confusion trying to enter into this play-by-post because.
I think that one was just miscommunication. Like, I don't know why everyone got so confused. I was trying to explain to them, I was like, look, you guys already been to the college. because this is only supposed to be talking. So if anything other else than talking
Right.
happens, that means the other two have to leave. Like that's just it. But
Yeah.
yeah, what they did wasn't very long or very difficult. So they just kind of went over there.
It
They
was
had a discussion.
after what we were supposed to be doing, and
Yeah, and I think that
I
just threw
think
everybody off.
yeah. So I know that I one of the things that I think might help a situation like this that I'd be willing to try is having some sort of a and I know other groups, some other groups do this. My other group does it, is have some sort of a summary posted after every session of where we're at, and this is what we said we were going to do. I
Oh,
don't
that's shady.
necessarily think the GM has to be the one to do that. Our GM in my home group does, but the thing's not a summary. It's a play-by-play account of everything that happened. I
Yeah, I
think
can't
a
keep up with
summary would
those.
do. Like where we ended up, at our last session, we went with the regent and did some training exercises and ran into some serious threats. And this is where we ended up. This is where everyone was going. This is where we're picking up next time. Just then everybody can refer back and see what's going on, figure out where we're at in the timeline, and be prepared hopefully for the next session and not have that confusion. So I'd be willing to try that. I don't know whether our group would utilize it. I suspect that some people would. I'm not sure that some of the others would.
Yeah.
So
So it might only help you and Miriam. That's I guess what I'm hearing.
who are probably the only people who are tracking that stuff anyway. We're pretty much aware. But now
Yeah,
it's
I'm thinking it might be great to split up the group just a little bit. So, because I don't mind, smaller group sessions, and I think that in this case is coming up, it might be a lot of fun, just so we can kind of get back to what we're doing, and then kind of bring a whole new like breath of fresh air once the group gets back together.
the other
So
thing is it kind of makes me wonder if downtime maybe doesn't need to be as involved. We've been having a blast with it. I have been having a huge blast with it. I think it's almost as much fun as dealing with actual situations in the group. Doing, shopping and resupplying our home, our home away from home, our treehouse, and foraging and all that kind of stuff is almost really fun for me. But maybe it can be simplified. Maybe it can be like, these are the things we want to accomplish. Okay, roll these things and this will give you your outcome. For every hour you want to forage, roll this and roll this, and this is how successful you were. This is what you ended up with. For every hour you want to, or for every day that you want to make potions, roll this. This is how many you end up with, or whatever. Rather than some of the other things we're doing. And same thing with shopping. Like, unless somebody, it's been fun, but maybe some of that can just be,
yeah, sometimes I definitely hand wave it. Like when you're doing your food shopping, just giving the option to say, hey, just have your brothers have somebody go pick everything up for you. It's like, it worked out.
Which I totally did, right? Because it just made it so much easier. And of course, Shay had other things to do, and she didn't know her way around town. So it made sense to have somebody who did help. So, but it also, like thinking about other things that people might want to accomplish, maybe it's easier to say, okay, well, you guys are going to be in town for this much time. It's going to be 2 months. It's going to be 3 weeks. It's going to be whatever. What do you want to accomplish while you're there? And then, of course, having the opportunity to either do a play-by-post or a one-on-one sessions or mini sessions, which is pretty much what we've done, right?
Yeah.
But so that's maybe a thought of just simplifying it and saying, hey, these are your downtime activities. And then, gosh, if there's a side quest, we can do that.
Yeah,
so,
there's always room for side quests. I love side quests.
Always room for side quests. I think my preference would be that side quests would be as a group, though. But that's just me. And I don't think there's anything. I agree that that the side quests.
Well, that's so funny that you say that, though. Because we have Hema, though, who's entirely against side quests. She's so driven when she wants to be. It's freaking hilarious, and so undriven when she doesn't want to be.
And yet she is kind of into side quests because she keeps going off and doing them with Echo.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what are you doing? But like, if there's ever any time a
Like,
group is together, she's like, no, no, no. We have our main thing over there. Screw the whole village. It's like, Hema, come on.
okay, which is it, Hema?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think she's going through like a identity crisis in the game as we're playing.
yeah,
It's freaking insane.
right.
I love it.
So funny.
So, and
Um,
then it's just our group is so crazy because we have like legitimately two. Well, we have one evil character, and no one really knows who they are, and we have another person that's just so unevil but evil at the same time. Like I don't
yes,
even know what's going on with her. I think that person is just like going through turmoil in her own mind.
yes.
And then you have Hema who's fighting with because she's a ranger, but she's more primal than anybody else. So at halftime, she's like, I think we should just let him die. And it's like, aren't you good? No, okay. Well, Sarlo Pittis, yeah, sure. And then we have Shay, who's just like the do-gooder of all. She's basically a paladin. I swear, she missed her calling. She's a druid, but she's really a paladin.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
you're
interesting.
so do-goody. I love it. And then
She
it's just
is
like,
very do-goody.
and then there's Echo, who's going down this really scary path of summoning demons, and I basically making another subclass for him, and too many subclasses, but I'm actually really enjoying it because it gives me something to think about.
He's
But
scary.
yeah, he's getting scary. Like he summoned a demon inside the house.
He's scary.
Yeah. So I
um,
don't know.
yeah. I think Shay, that's interesting, the paladin thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
It's
Shay is
funny though,
starting to
'cause
pray more, and
she's socially awkward too, because she spent a lot of time in the wilderness by herself.
she also
So
has an attitude.
she has an attitude from time to time, yeah. Yeah. She doesn't like it when she's doing her best to try to do good,
Mhm.
and and then when somebody accuses, she gets really upset when people accuse her of
Yeah, she
being
doesn't like
lying.
being persecuted.
Yeah, she doesn't like that at all. So, and she can get an attitude. Yeah, she's kind of surprised me because I thought she'd be more like happy-go-lucky all the time, but I find that she gets into some situations where she gets pissy.
All right, so I have one last question for anybody who's watching, and I think it's be a perfect time to wrap it up. Would you guys be interested in us doing a show, or not doing a show, but start recording our game sessions from this point? Because I feel like this is a pretty good wash point, so people can kind of come. I can do like a little summary of what's happening, and then watch as the characters progress. They're starting. You guys are level 10, right? Level 9 right now.
9. Mm-hmm.
9. We're level 9, so it's gonna be kind of further along in. But I think from this point, it should be interesting enough to watch. So I don't know. Just want your opinions and views on it about what you guys think. Anyways, besides that, I think I'm done. Is there anything else you want to add in?
I think that's it. I think this is a good place to wrap.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. It's a little different than our typical format, but we thought just a chatty, like what's going on in our gaming
Yeah,
life
just kind of hang out with us.
would be fun. So I can see somebody really wants to get a hold of Nate, though. So we will catch you guys later.
Right.
And so don't forget, as always, to hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this video so that we know to make more like it. And subscribe and share with your friends. And until next time, get out and get gaming.
Thank you guys for watching. Bye.